Very much. I must first admit that only sitting here I really appreciate the length of the table, because when sitting here it actually looks to the end of the world or something like it. A lot has been said about the great progress of Karaite studies in the last few years. The progress has been in many different fields. New Karaite texts are being discovered and analyzed, and the opening up of the libraries of the former Soviet Union has been particularly important in this regard. I hope you recognize the lines of the brochure for this workshop. But there is no doubt, with all due respect to Daniel El-Qumisi, there is no doubt that the one person who drew most of the attention of scholars all over the world was Abu Ali al-Basri Halevi, known better as Yefet ben Ali. Recent years have witnessed a growing of general interest among biblical scholars and medieval historians, as well as a revival of specialized research into the works of Karaite Bible commentators. But still, Yefet ben Ali, who lived in Jerusalem during the second half of the 10th century, draws most of the attention. New studies devoted to specific aspects or sections of its Judeo-Arabic translations and commentaries on the Hebrew Bible have concentrated attention on the importance of Yefet's achievements. In the recent years, we gained substantial insight into the scriptural approach current among Yefet's predecessors and contemporaries in the Jerusalem circle of the second half of the 10th century, a fact that gives us better understanding of Yefet's exegetical work and emphasizes his importance. Yefet's Arabic biblical translations reflect a well-defined methodology, which gives further expression to the Karaite linkage between the analysis of linguistic form and the discovery of meaning. The objective is to reflect accurately to the reader the linguistic structure of the biblical source text through the medium of an Arabic translation that appears consistently alongside the Hebrew source language. The translation is literal in that it remains imitative of the original word order and other syntactic elements, which sometimes contradict Arabic syntactic norms. Yet the purpose of this literalism is not imitative per se, but has a didactic aim. It teaches the correct way of reading the Hebrew Bible. Yefet's Arabic commentary follows the translation and is complementary to it, in that it unfolds before the reader the hermeneutical processes and interpretation of the underlying meaning reflected by the translated text. Various possibilities of meanings are discussed in relation to proposed syntactic reconstruction, while the outcome of this interpretive activity is what is prevailed. Moreover, whereas a translation is based on the linguistic analysis of small sentence units, the commentary provides space for discourse analysis of wider textual units and narrative themes, and for the development of literary, historical, and rhetorical insights. Yefet was not as exposed as later members of the Karaite Golden Age to Mu'tazilite influences, nor to Arabic linguistic thinking. For these reasons, his writings are not as sophisticated in their philosophical argumentation or their theological thought. Neither did Yefet channel his intellectual effort to developing an individual expertise in the fields of philosophy, language, or legal thought, as did the Karaites of the Golden Age in the 11th century and their house of learning in Jerusalem. Yefet's importance lies in the originality and depth of his literary reading of the biblical text and his comprehensive approach to scripture. Yefet undertook a life project in translating and commenting on all books of the Hebrew Bible in Arabic, a task to which he devoted more than 30 years of his life. It seems as if he has been seeking a project of wide enough scope to present his approach, or the Karaite approach in general, to biblical exegesis. He, moreover, appears to have been widely recognized among the Karaites community as being one who could take on the task of laying down the foundations of Karaite exegesis as an independent and prestigious field of study, and enable it to stand in its own ground in the competition with the rabbinic exegesis, both in its traditional mode and in the sophisticated medieval mode given to it by Rav Saadia Gaon. We may surmise that Yefet acted as a major link between the Karaite exegetes of the late 9th and early 10th centuries, whose works were written partly in Hebrew in the Karaite centers of Iraq and Persia, and the later Karaite exegetes of the 11th century Golden Age. Moreover, Yefet's commentaries are widely known and respected among medieval rabbinites, who cite him in their Bible commentaries with or without mentioning his name. Yefet's heritage became integrated into the medieval Pshat tradition of Hebrew Bible exegesis and had a profound influence on the development of Jewish Bible exegesis in Muslim lands, including Spain. Yet, despite their importance, very few of Yefet's biblical works have appeared in critical editions, only some of which contain English or Hebrew translations. I didn't know that I'll be preceded by Marzena's lecture, so I'll mention a few of the things already heard. But in recent years, we witnessed a change in this field. More and more texts of Yefet's commentaries are being published, and more exegetical works are edited in critical editions. Among those works, Yefet's commentaries on the minor prophets take a vast place. We should mention the critical edition of the book of Hosea published by Professor Meir Poliak and myself, the critical edition on the book of Amos by Dr. Merav Nadler-Akirev from Bar-Ilan University under my supervision and the gracious help of Professor Poliak. Also, I would like to mention the MA thesis of Mr. Yair Suran from the Hebrew University under the supervision of Dr. Miriam Goldstein on the book of Ovadia, and before that, the MA thesis of Dr. Ofer Kafri Livne on the book of Chavakuk, as well as a few articles written by the speaker and others on Yefet's translations and commentaries on the books of Malachi, Ovadia, and Jonas, and also by, we heard about the critical edition of the book of Zechariah by Marjana before that. We might ask ourselves why Yefet's commentaries on the minor prophets are so popular nowadays. Well, a very simple answer is because they are minor. I mean, it's easier and quicker to complete a research on the books of Hosea or Zechariah, the longest books among the minor prophets, which contain 14 chapters each, than to complete a research on the book of Isaiah or Jeremiah, which hold 52 or 66 chapters. But there might be another reason. Yefet's works on the 12 minor prophets demonstrate all the characteristics of Yefet's exegetical approach that can be found in his larger commentaries. Scholars who want to learn about Yefet's approach to the Bible and about his methods of translation and exegesis will be able to fulfill the wish in his works on the minor prophets, as well as in his works on the book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, or Ezekiel. In this lecture, I want to deliver a preliminary report on another critical edition in progress, the commentary of Yefet on the book of Zephania. Yefet's translation, and I mean only the translation, on the book of Zephania has been published more than 100 years ago by Alfred Heitz, based on manuscript Huntington 206. Other portions of this manuscript were published by Schroeter, by Friedman, and by Klein, but none of the four editors identified the translation as made by Yefet ben Eli the Karaite. Here you see the cover of the first edition. You see eine anonyme arabische Übersetzung und Erklärung der Propheten Zephania, Haggai, Zephania, Haggai, and Zechariah. And you see it down there, Berlin, 1902, and in the right you may see even the famous German seal. The same manuscript, Huntington 206, was published approximately 100 years later by Professor Yitzhak Avishur, but unfortunately he didn't identify the author as well. My interest in this commentary began when I offered a student of mine, Mrs. Michal Diminsky-Tsarfati, to edit this commentary as her MA thesis. She is still struggling with it, but my interest is to publish it in the near future as a critical annotated edition. The edition I'm here to report about would include 4 manuscripts. The most important one, and the one the edition will be based upon, is manuscript British Library OR 2401, consisting of 261 leaves, which contains the second half of Yefet's commentary on the Minor Prophets, from the book of Jonah up to the book of Malachi. The commentary of Yefet on the first books of the Minor Prophets is to be found in manuscript British Library OR 2400, the heading of which is, and here you see it from the catalogue, Al-Juz al-Awwal bin Sharh Sefer Tre Asar min Kalam al-Sheikh al-Fadel החכם הנבון, מורנו ורבנו, או מרנה ורבנה, יפת הלוי, המכונה באבו עלי אל-Basri. The first portion of the commentary of the Minor Prophets by the virtuous scholar, etc. And the end of the book of Haggai, which is already in our manuscript, is written كمل الشرح حجاي عليه السلام وكان الفروغ منه يوم الأحد 6 في חודש אדר ראשון سنة תמ"ח לבריאת העולם, וכתב אותו האלם הצעיר, הענב הצעיר מכל בני העיר, שמואל מלמד בן כבוד הרב ברוך רופא, ישמרהו צורו וינצרהו פארץ מצרים. And at the end of the book of Malachi, we find written, קמו לה שרח ספר תרי עשר בעזרת האל, הגומל לחייבים טובות ושלום, וכאן الفروغ منه يوم الأحد 20 في חודש אדר ראשון, سنة תמ"ח ליצירה, الموافق לשער רביע الثاني من سنة 1000 צדיק ט' לישמעאל ושלום על ישראל. Yefet's commentary on the book of Zephania was copied, therefore, in Egypt by Samuel ben Baruch in the year 1688. The last 20 leaves of the manuscript were copied at the same month by Baruch, the father of the preceding scribe. Here is a sample of the commentary on the book of Zephania, and please, I would like to draw your attention, I brought it especially with me, I hope you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. But anyway, those who can will see that the name of the Lord is written here in a very unique way. It reads Kakaulihi vehiviu et kol. Well, I can't read it myself. vehiviu et kol acheichem mikol agoyim mincha lahashem. You see Lamed Yud, and there is a Yud, but between there is something like a Lamed. Now, usually we know that the name of the Lord is written Yud, Vav, Yud, or Yud, 3 Yuds in a row, or 2 and 1 upon them. Here there is something between. It's not a Lamed, as you can see the Lamed before, or if you don't see, you'll have to believe me. Anyway, I asked the advice of Professor Ben Shammai, and as he was my tutor in my dissertation, there was no reason for me not to follow his advice this time, and I transcribed this as Yud, Vav, and again Yud. From one place in the commentary on Zephania, we may conclude that the whole work on the 12 minor prophets was written in the order, according to the order of the books. Here you see a part of the commentary taken from the third chapter of Zephania, verse 19. وَقَدْ كَانَتْ فَسَّرْتُ. Of course, this makes no sense, and you can see down there in the you can see in the version down here, instead of kanat, it should be read kuntu, which of course is more sensible. وقد كنت فسرت معنى هذه اللفظتين أعني הצולעה והנידחה from צפניה في פסל ביום ההוא נאום השם אוספה הצולעה, a verse from מיכה chapter 4 verse 6. يوقف عليه من ثم, meaning that you can take the meaning, you can understand. There I فسرت, there I explained those words. In other words, the book of Zephania occurs ninth among the 12 minor prophets, preceded by Chavakuk and followed by Haggai. The citation from the book of Micha teaches us that the commentary of the book of Zephania was written after the commentary on the book of Micha has already been finished, according to the order of the books. The prophet Zephania was a contemporary of the prophet Jeremiah. King Josiah ruled over Judah from approximately 640 up to 609 BC. It is believed, therefore, that the picture of Jerusalem, which Zephania gives, indicates that he was active prior to the religious reforms of King Josiah, which are described in Kings 2nd, chapter 23, and took place in 622 BC. The context of the book of Zephania falls into two parts: the coming judgment on the world, including Israel and the nations, and a promise of universal salvation. The calamity will find everyone, even the hiding places of Jerusalem, Moab, Ammon, Cush, and Assyria shall be overwhelmed by punishment and disaster. Jerusalem in particular, being corrupt and disobedient to the word of the Lord, shall fall under the divine wrath. Yet God promised that after the day of judgment, Israel shall be humbled and shall trust in God alone. New social conditions shall arise, and justice and righteousness shall prevail. One of the most prominent themes in the book of Zephania is the ingathering of the exiles. And I read the last verse of the book. At that time will I bring you again, even in the time that I gather you, for I will make you a name and a praise among all people on the earth, when I turn back your captivity before your eyes, saith the Lord, is a translation of King James. Yefet describes the time of the ingathering of the exiles in his commentary of chapter 3, verse 10. عرف أنهم إذا دخلوا في الدين ويعلموا أن قوم من إسرائيل قد بقيوا في أطراف العالم فيمضون الجويم ويحتالوا بمجيهم إلى أرض إسرائيل. فذكر في هذا الفسوق أن قوم من إسرائيل, he repeats it for some reason, قد بقيوا في أطراف العالم فيمضون الجويم إليهم فيحتالوا في مجيهم أرض إسرائيل وكونهم في تلك الناحية لجزر أنهار الحبشة والذي يقطعهم عن المجيء هو أنهار عظيمة وجبال شامخة كقول يشعياhu عليه السلام علیه السلام هوي أرץ رצת כנפיים וגומר, يعني أنها كثيرة الأجنحة بالجبال الذي حواليها ومع ذلك فلهم أعداء حواليهم فليس يمكنهم أن يجوا إلى ذلك الزمان فحينئذ يثير رب العالمين قلوب باقية الجويم حتى يمرون ويجيبوهم. Meaning that at this time of the ingathering of the exiles, there will be left people of Israel in the end of the world. They won't be able to come because of great rivers and huge tall mountains. Therefore, the Lord will stir the hearts of the Gentiles, so they'll go and bring Israel to Eretz Israel. And as you see, the verse, מעבר לנהרי חוש, עטרי בת פוצה יובילון מנחתי, a very difficult verse by itself. The words יובילון מנחתי, he explains, وقوله يובילون מנחתי, يريد به يובילون העמים את עטרי בת פוצי, הדיע إلى المשיח. وقوله منحتي, mincha, we know the word, it's a part of the ritual in the temple. Mincha is sacrificed on the altar. ليعرف أنهم يصنوهم ويعزوهم كما تصان المنحة. As one guards and protects the mincha, that nothing will happen to it before brought on the altar, so this is the way all the Gentiles will guard and protect the people of Israel. فالرجال, he puts the sign of the Dhamma, فالرجال منهم يركبوا على الخيل. The men will ride on horses. ونساء والشيوخ بالعمديات والقباب. The women and the elder ones will be taken on wagons. And وأما الأطفال فيحملون في الحجر والأكتاف كقوله etc. The younger ones will be taken on hand and will be carried on the shoulder. But the first thing that draws the attention of the reader while opening the book of Zephania is his genealogical tree. Zephania ben Kushi, ben Gedalia, ben Amaria, ben Chizkiah, b'mei Yoshiyahu, melech Yehuda, the word of the Lord which came unto Zephania, the son of Kushi, the son of Gedalia, the son of Amaria, the son of Chizkiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. In this genealogical report, the prophets enumerates 4 generations: Kushi, Gedalia, Amaria, and Chizkiah. There isn't a clue as to the identity of Chizkiah, but most of the Middle Ages commentators, including Yefet himself, as well as most of the modern scholars, take it for granted that he refers to Chizkiah, king of Judah. We may therefore conclude that if Zephania was of royal descent, he probably lived in Jerusalem. Evidence of this is seen in his prophecies, where he describes various parts of the city. Chapter 1, verse 10. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that there shall be the noise of a cry from the fish gate, and an hollowing from the second, and a great crashing from the hills. As already mentioned above, according to the first verse of the book of Zephania, according to the first verse of the book, Zephania flourished during the days of Josiah prior to reforms after 621 BC. The pictures of corruption and the approaching fall most approximately refer to the situation in Judah during the early years of King Josiah. Zephania's unique genealogical report is already discussed in Yefet's introduction to the minor prophets, which precedes his commentary on the book of Hosea. Here you have the Arabic text, and I'll read the translation. The first matter that needs to be prefaced in the order of the books of the prophets that are mentioned in the Bible, of course, we say that there are 15 prophets, each of whom established the collection of his prophecy. Having mentioned وَبَعْدَ أَنْ ذَكَرْنَا, having mentioned what is required by the proper arrangement of the books, we come to discuss the difference between them in terms of the origin, for we have identified 3 aspects of this difference, and you can see it all by yourself. I skip a little. As for those whose fathers he mentioned, they also have several categories. Regarding some of them, he mentioned their fathers alone, and there are 6: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Joel, and Jonah. he mentioned the father and grandfather alone only in the case of Zechariah. And he adds, he mentioned 4 ancestors only in the case of Zephania. And Yefet adds, he whose father alone he mentioned, his grandfather was not esteemed. He whose grandfather he also mentioned, his father and grandfather were esteemed. And his grandfather was more esteemed than his father. In the same manner, he traced Zephania to Chizkiah because he was a king. The measure of their esteem is also in several categories, in relation to royalty, in relation to priesthood, and in relation to prophecy. The esteem of Isaiah and Zephania was in relation to royalty. Those whom he mentioned only by name, it is likely they are from Jerusalem. Yefet returns to this issue, to Zephania's genealogical report, tree. He returns to this issue in the opening of his commentary on the book of Zephania. And you see here, דבר השם אשר היה, etc. هذا النبي عليه السلام تنبأ في زمان يوشياو ويوشياو كان الجن الثالث ليحزقياو ملك يهودا. I mean, just simple, very, very simple. And I skip a little to the last 2 lines of this paragraph. ونسبه إلى يحزقيا ليعرف أولاد الملك. Or you see better, instead of ليعرف, you see down there a version ليعرف أنه من أولاد الملك, or probably الملك. وليس نجد في الأنبياء من ينسبه إلى 4 أباء, meaning he was the only one who was whose 4 ancestors were mentioned. والمعنى في ذلك هو ما قلنا إنه أراد به أن, again, Abahu makes no sense. The better reading is downstairs. An Yuriya Sharafahu means to demonstrate his honor. As mentioned before, the commentary on the book of Zephania reflects most, if not all, the well-known characteristics of Yefet's exegetical methodology, including his literal translations of the verses, his literary sensitivity, and even his concept of the Mudawwan, a persona other than the Prophet himself, who acted as the compiler editor of the book. Let us say a few words about Yefet's exegetical methods and demonstrate them with a few citations from his work. As is well known, Yefet embraced the linguistic contextual method, which is identified with the term pshat or zahir. But in some cases, he finds himself compelled to apply another interpretation, which complies with a non-literal homiletic didactic method, which might be called drash or baten or ta'wil. And here we have an example. גם כספם, גם זהבם, לא יוכל להצילם ביום עברת השם, ובאש קנאתו תאכל כל הארץ. And I want to focus on the words ובאש קנאתו, the end of the first line. ובאש קנאתו יחתמלו أنه على ظهره. I mean, probably, says Yefet, probably it's pshat, ظاهر, what we see. وهي نار العدو التي تحرق يروشلايم وعري يهودا. Meaning, באש קנאתו, קנאתו meaning the Lord, Esh means fire, and fire means fire as we understand it, that will burn the city of Jerusalem and the cities of Yehuda. But ويحتمل أنه يرد به حماة الشم الذي أنزلها بهم فقسم أفاته, etc. Meaning that another possibility is that Esh Kinato is not real fire, but just the anger of the Lord. And the Lord, with his anger, then he'll bring all the calamities as mentioned here and in other places. And there is another place where Yefet uses the two terms, Zahir, in contradiction to Batin. As you see in those two verses, the word Yom is mentioned a few times. The first time it's mentioned by itself. Yom Avra, it should be Avra. I don't want to speak about the way the Nikud is written. It's probably a way of a tradition of reading or something like that. Yom Evra HaYom Ahu. I mean, the word Yom is followed only by one description. Unlike the other words, the other places where the word Yom occurs, Yom, now there are two descriptions. Tzara u'metzuka, Yom Sho'a u'meshu'a, Yom Chosher ve'arafel, Yom Anan ve'arafel, Yom Shofar u'teruah. And of course, Yefet, with his literary sensitivity, pays attention to this fact, and he reads somewhere in the middle. فذكر لفظة يوم, you can see it from here. فذكر لفظة just let me finish. فذكر لفظة يوم ستة دفعات. 6 times the word يوم is mentioned in here. منها واحد منها مفردة والخمسة أزواج. كل زوج منها متجانس أعني أن تصرا ومتسوكا متجانسين وكذلك شوآ ومشوآ وتمام الخمسة. I mean, as I explained, there are the word Yom afterwards, there are two descriptions which are in general are alike. But إلى أن الواحد الأخير أصعب من الأول, meaning that the second description is more horrifying, is more difficult than the first of the two. And as you see, he explains each of them. وأما معنى تصرا وأما متسوكا وأما الشوراء etc. وأما يوم حوشق وأفلا يريد به بالليل, meaning it describes the time of the night. وأما يوم عنان وأرفل يريد به بالنهار, meaning the daytime. فصر ليل حوشق بأفلا بما لم يكن فيه نور القمر والكواكب. The light of the moon and the stars won't be seen at that time. And wasara nahar, there will be even the daytime. Anan ve'arafel lima udima nur shams, the light of the sun won't be seen. Hada, he adds, إذا فسر على ظهيره. This is if we understand it according to the pshat. وأما إذا فسر على بطنه فهو يريد به إدبار إسرائيل الذي أدبر عليهم الرحمن وكان إدبارهم في إقبال كل من جاء, meaning there's nothing to do with light or not being light or something like this. It means the failure of Israel, which will take place or which will happen by the fact that everyone who will come against Israel will succeed. Iqbal kul man ja. So here we have one near the other in clear contradiction, Zahir and Batin. As I've already mentioned, Yefet has. What happens now? Okay. Yefet's literary sensitivity is well demonstrated in the following example. This is the last verse of the first chapter. גם כספם גם זהבם לא יוכל להצילם ביום עברת השם ובאש קנאתו תאכל כל הארץ. Yefet pays attention and draws our attention as well that the chapter finishes with the words כי חלה אך נבהלה, which reminds him of the first words of the chapter, the second verse, Asof Asef, Kol Me'al Pnei Adama. I will utterly consume all things of the land, said the Lord. And he writes, وقوله كي خلا أخ نفهلا هو ختم الفصل بالمعنى التي ابتدأ به وذلك أنه ابتدأ بأسوف أسيف وختم بلفظة خلا ويريد به فناء الناس من أرض إسرائيل. As simple as it looks, I haven't found, well, at least yet, just a preliminary report, but I haven't found any commentator who pays attention to this very nice thing. I'll skip another one, and I'll go to another famous exegetical method used largely by Yefet, and this is citing multiple explanations, and in some cases even trying to decide between them. אסף אדם ובהמה, אסף עוף השמיים ודגי הים, והמכשלות את הרשעים, והכרתי את האדם מעל פני האדמה נאום השם. وقوله והכרתי את האדם, he writes, بعد قوله أسف أدم, I mean, we might have thought that there is no need for the words והכרתי את האדם mentioning specifically והכרתי את האדם after already saying אסף אדם ובהמה עוף השמיים etc. But no, the prophet mentions specifically והכרתי את האדם. وقوله והכרתי את האדם بعد قوله أسف أدم يحتمل وجهين. أحد هو أنه أراد بقوله أسف أدم أكثر الناس والبهائم وطائر. Meaning that God will eliminate most of the living upon the earth, meaning men, the animals, and everything else. But then وقال והכרתי את ليوري الفرق بين أدم وبين غيره وهو أنه ليس يفني كل دجى הים ولا كل بهما ועוף الذي حد في أرض إسرائيل فأما ناس فليس يبقى منهم أحدا فلذلك قال והכרתי את האדם قول مفرد. Meaning that Asef Adam Uvehema, Asef of Shamayim Udgei Hayam means that God will eliminate them. But there is a difference between the elimination of men and the elimination of others, because the men will perish, all of them will, in contradiction to the others, the parts of them will survive. And then he added another. والثاني هو من second وجه يحتمل وجهين والثاني هو أنه قسم إناس الذي في الأرض فجعل بعدهم تحت, you see the version down there, تحت أسف أدم وبهמה وبعدهم تحت והכרתי את האדם ותحت נתתי את ידי על יהודה וירושלים والقول الأول أقرب. Meaning that no, says Yefet, there is no real difference, but Adam, he splitted it. Half of them was written under Asef Adam Uvehema, and the second part was under V'ichrati et Adam, but yet he says that he decides that the first explanation is better than the second one. In one case, before that, Yefet does not rely heavily upon grammatical interpretations. Yet, in the commentary on the book of Zephania, we find a large number of interpretations which are based on grammatical elements. And even in one case, the prophet Zephania related directly to the status of the Hebrew language in the days to come. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord, to serve him with one consent. כי אז יהפוך אל עמים שפה ברורה, לקרוא כולם בשם השם, לעובדו שכם אחד. فقوله יהפוך אל עמים, يكون ذلك على أحد وجهين. Again, you see possibilities. إما أن يفعل الله معهم كما فعل في دور הפלגה, الذي أنساهم لشون הקודש وألهمهم لغات أخر, فبقي لشון הקודש מענוח ושם ועבר. As happened in the Tower of Babel, the Lord will make them forget all the languages, and they forgot in the Tower of Babel. They forgot Lashon HaKodesh. They forgot the Hebrew language, and God made them know in a miraculous way, Ilham. He made them. He taught them other languages, while Lashon HaKodesh was left only with Noach, Shem, ve'Ever. Fakadaka, and it's exactly will happen in the end of the days. Fakadaka yunsihim jami' lugat, wa yulhimuhim Lashon HaKodesh, فيعودوا إلى اللغة الأصلية التي كانوا عليها كقوله ويخل الأرض صفا أحد. Meaning, at the end of the days, the first situation, what was before the Tower of Babel, will return. God will make them safa b'hura, meaning he'll make them forget all the other languages, and they'll know only the word, by ilham, they'll know only the Lashon HaKodesh. This is one possibility. Or, there in the middle, أو يكون يقلب لغتهم إلى لشون القدس للتعليم, أو better the version down there للتعاليم الذي يتعلموها من إسرائيل, فإذا تولد وله ولد في دور يشوع كانت لغته صحيحة بلشون القدس, وفي ذلك الزمان يتعلموا لشون القدس ويعلموا أولادهم فتكون لغة أولادهم أفصح من لغتهم. Meaning, no, they won't forget their languages, but they'll know Hebrew as well, and they'll teach their sons the Hebrew language, so that they'll be able to learn things from the people of Israel. Another place where Yefet uses grammatical elements, אסוף אסף כל מעל פני אדמה נאום השם, עברתו אסוף איחשר, ג'עלתוהו מסדר, meaning infinitive, مثل שמוע בין אחיכם, ועברתו אסף أقردو, والأمر منه הסף, وقال آخر أنه اسم, meaning it's a noun, مثل أهב, ولكن, and you see down the version, ولكن يؤثر أن يتركب مصدر على اسم من جنس لجنسه والأول أقرب. It's not really important what it's written here, but only the fact that he deals with grammatical issues. Or in the second paragraph there, وقد يسأل الناس, يسأل of course يسأل, وقد يسأل الناس عن قوله והייתה חבל הים בלשון נקבה. והייתה, the verb והייתה shows that חבל is feminine. ثم قال بعده והיה חבל, masculine. فنقول إنه يريد به והייתה أرץ חבל הים. كما من شأن الكتاب يختصر في كثير من المواضيع. We might have called it as well تقدير, but again you see that he deals with those issues. Another very interesting place is where Yefet uses Aramaic in order to explain a difficult word. Fassaru nitzdu, taken from Zephania 3:6. Fassaru nitzdu, charibu. And by the way, again, it's only a preliminary report, but it's the only place where I saw resemblance between Daniel al-Qumisi and Yefet. Means fassaru is probably he means Daniel. Min al-tarjum, meaning from the tirgum. لأن الترجمات, of course, hayta tohu vavohu havat tzedaya urekanya. Wal amr, the imperative minhu hatzde, مثل نيرؤو هرئه. وقال مفسر آخر في تفسير نصدو أنه يريد به ينقصدوا, and this doesn't really interest us. Another thing, another methods he uses, en mukdam u'meuchar, means there is no late or early in the Bible. because you see here, I want to read everything, you see, והיה חילם למשיסה ובתיהם לשממה, means that their houses will be empty, will be demolished. And after this, the prophet says, uvanu batim. I mean, it should be vice versa. And that's exactly what he says. وَقَوْلُهُ uvanu batim بَعْدَ قَوْلِهِ وَبَتِمْ لِمْشِسَى يجوز أنه مقدم ومؤخر ويريد به إذا عمروا منازل لم يسكنوا فيها فتبقى من بعده. And another thing, and here you see it in another place, מושך עצמו ואחר עמו means that one verb in this case serves not only the verse which it's in, but also other verses. You see in verse number 4, ויכרתי מן המקום הזה, and there you see a whole list. 1, את שאר הבעל. 2, את שם הכמרים עם הכהנים. 3, ואת המשתחווים על הגגות לצבא השמיים. 4, ואת המשתחווים הנשבעים להשם והנשבעים במלכם. 5, ואת הנסוגים אחרי השם ואשר לא ביקשו. And this Yefet explains, فعرف أنه يهلكهم بقوله ויכרתי מן המקום הזה את שאר הבעל, وهو מושך עצמו ומושך אחרים. إذ هذه ثلاثة وثيق هم تحت והכרתי. Of course there are other things, but I want to finish with another very nice maybe anecdote. והיה ביום זבח השם ופקדתי על השרים ועל בני המלך ועל כל הלובשים מלבוש נוכרי. And malbush nochri, he translates وعلى كل اللبسين ملبوس أجنبي. وقوله, he writes, ملبوش نخري يجوز أنهم كانوا يلبسوا لباس عبدي عبودة زرا مثل لباس الرهبان والشمامسة في زماننا هذا. I mean, in our time we see that the priests are wearing special cloth, and maybe that's exactly what happened at the time of the prophet Zephania. الذي كان من رسم إسرائيل أن, that's of course wonderful, أن يلبسوا, of course we see the version يلبسوا يلبسون أن يلبسوا ذلك الملبوس في ذلك الزمان. As already mentioned more than once, it's only at a preliminary report. You'll have to wait for the complete edition, which I hope will be published in the near future. Thank you.